All right. This is Chris Grundemann and Matt Griswold with FullCtl. Today, we're going to talk about internet exchanges and why they might want to offer a SLA. Um, so, I don't know. First, Grizz, maybe it would be worth just like explaining what an SLA even is at all.
Sure. That seems like something that might be better for you to do than me, but I can take a stab.
That's fine. I just didn't want to start off monologuing, but I
Yep.
can if you want.
Oh, I could just say SLA is a service level agreement, which is basically a promise to your customers on what the service level is going to be. So it generally covers things like um, flat outages, and in internet exchanges, especially, or in the ones I've done in the past anyway, we include things like latency and possibly jitter. A lot of the benefits of connecting to an IX is low latency and direct connections to your peers. So some people like to know that you're actually going to connect you with your peers at a low latency link.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes a lot of sense. So these SLAs, these service level agreements, exactly what you said, right? I mean, and this is something, for folks that are totally unfamiliar, when you've heard of like 4 nines or 5 nines or 6 nines, like all the nines, that's often, you're talking about that usually in the context of an SLA. And so that's like 99.99 whatever. So 4 nines would be 99.99, and then 5 nines would be 99.999. And when you start to extrapolate that out into the course of a year, that adds up to a lot of minutes potentially, right? Because
I think
um,
5 nines is only 2 minutes of
yeah,
downtime.
yeah, right. So if you're, yeah, exactly. And so the more nines you add, the less downtime is allowed within that policy or that SLA per year. And that's just downtime, right? And then, as you said, there's also latency, which can be just, whatever you put a range on it, right? This is going to be less than 10 milliseconds or less than 20 milliseconds or whatever. And jitter obviously can be measured in jitter. And you just basically put a range of like how much downtime, how much latency, how much jitter, whatever else may be there for those conditions. So that's an SLA. And historically, we've gotten SLAs from various service providers, right? So internet service providers are probably the most relevant here when they provide either transport, which is kind of point to point or point to multi point services, or transit, which is your internet access. Those type of circuits usually come with some kind of SLA. But a lot of internet exchanges haven't done SLAs. Um, Grizz, maybe it's worth talking about like which internet exchanges have SLAs, which ones don't. Do any internet exchanges have SLAs today?
I guess I know the Chicago Internet Exchange had a very nice SLA. We had 100% uptime, and I don't remember what the latency was. So they definitely exist. I guess I'm not actually familiar with what other IXs are offering.
Yeah,
The problem being that a lot of IXs are the homegrown kind of nonprofit or run by a single person IX that doesn't have an SLA and maybe up or maybe down. But I think also when you talk about an SLA, you're not talking about just the SLA itself. You're talking about, is there a 24-hour knock, or is there maybe not knock, but is there a 24-hour TAC that you can contact if you have issues? Is there somebody that's actively monitoring the exchange? Is there somebody that's going to be there to fix it if it goes down at 2 a.m.? I mean, those are the things that you really care about when you have an SLA, because otherwise the SLA is just you get some of your money back when there's an outage, but that doesn't do you a ton of good after the fact.
yeah, that's a really, really good point. And I think maybe it's worth. I'm going to kind of paraphrase what you said, just because I think it is a really excellent point, which is that I liked what you said earlier that essentially an SLA is a promise to your customer. And to your point, on paper, most SLAs just say something like, if we don't hit our SLA, we're going to give you a credit. We're going to credit back your outage, or we're going to credit back, and usually it's some kind of like actually um, like exponential credit, I guess. So a lot of times you'll see SLAs written that say, if you're down for 1 hour over the SLA, we'll credit you back a day of service or something, right? But usually then they cap out and they say, okay, well, we'll only credit you 1 month, total. So you can't get like a free bill for years or anything like that if we have a major outage. But anyway, as you said, right, you're just getting some money back, which isn't actually what you want. What you want is the service to stay up. And so in the context of this SLA being a promise, to your point, the important thing is that whoever is offering the SLA is mindfully and intentionally building the system, the team, whatever that's needed to actually deliver that SLA, right? And so to your point, they need 24/7 network operations. They need someone monitoring. They need, some kind of ability to troubleshoot. They need expertise behind the scenes to be able to fix stuff if it breaks. All those things, right? They need proactive monitoring, not just reactive monitoring, because if they wait for you to report it, it's already been down for maybe longer than the SLA was allowed. So really what you're looking for in an SLA, I think what you're saying is you're looking to make sure that they're actually offering a service that can provide that SLA.
Right, exactly. And that's why long ago I started just doing 100% SLAs because most people don't even realize the 5 nines stuff. Like I said, I believe it's 2 minutes a year. And I believe that back like 20 years ago when you said that it included maintenance periods. And now a lot of providers will do like you have a 5 nines SLA, but it doesn't count maintenance and they can drop an emergency maintenance anytime they want. So it's kind of all bullshit anyway. But by saying 100% SLA is just saying that I believe that it's saying that, look, everything's redundant. We have people watching it. We're doing everything in our ability to make sure that you're up 100% of the time.
Yeah. I just looked it up, by the way. 5 nines is 5 minutes and 13 seconds a year. So you're right. Right on, close enough. And what's interesting then, but if you break that down, that's 0.86 seconds a day. So if you're down for a full second, you're not 5 nines in any one day, which is pretty wild. Yes, that's wild. So, I think, so it sounds like, SLAs themselves, in the worst case, maybe aren't worth the paper they're written on. You get a little service credit, no big deal. But the spirit of the SLA, if done right, is that you've got this like robust service that you're providing and you're promising, hey, we're going to keep this up, right? Like it's not about the service credit. It's about the promise that we're going to keep this thing up. So it makes sense that you would want that. You would want an SLA from your service writers, network service writers for sure. And maybe all service writers, but we're talking about network here specifically. So, do you have any sense of why some internet exchange operators have been resistant to the idea of an SLA altogether?
I guess obviously I can't speak for them because I haven't like went out and done the research and talked to them. But I think the general spirit of it is they don't want to be on call for something that they do for as a passion. In many cases, they don't want to. They don't have a way to offer it. Like I said, I've done 100% SLAs pretty much my whole career, but I've also always done stuff with full redundancy and built things out so fact that I can confidently say it won't go down. And I think a lot of IXs aren't necessarily run that way. And just by
Yeah.
nature, if you have a single port, that's already a single point of failure. So if a customer doesn't have two ports, they're always going to have a single point of failure. So that makes it a little harder to do, maybe. But
Yeah, well, and that's an interesting point because there are definitely differences between kind of the, you can put an SLA on the IX itself, like the switching fabric versus that customer's connection. Because I think you're right, there is some tricky space there. Even if you want to offer an SLA, if the customer only wants to pay for a single port, there's not much you can do for that one port if that switch goes down, if that optic dies, something like that. I mean, obviously, there's a lot of proactive stuff you can do to make sure that doesn't happen. But at the end of the day, like you said, the real way to deliver a robust and resilient network service is always through redundancy, I think, right? I mean, that's the way you do it.
yep.
Um,
And even like when
cool.
you say like if an optic goes bad, like that's totally possible. But ideally, you have pre-wired optics already there, so you can just make a call to the data center, and that should be fixable if you're planning ahead. Like, do you have hot spares of everything and everything ready to go, or is it no? I have exactly what I need, and if your optic dies, I order one, and then next time I go to the data center, I take it over. You know what I mean? Like that could
Oh
easily
yeah,
turn into a week's outage if it's not done correctly. Whereas it should be
absolutely.
a 5 minute outage or something.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and like you said, yeah, and there's different levels there, right? You could have a hot standby right there ready, and all you have to do is move the fiber over. Or you could have cold standbys where at least you have extra optics and you can swap out the optic, which doesn't take a whole lot longer as long as, you've got it there. Or like you said, you could have no extras and you're running just bare bones, lean machine, and you've got to actually go order an optic and hope it shows up and hope the one that shows up is good and all that stuff. Yeah. Um, so getting back to like why IXs, don't provide an SLA, I will add, I've heard, anecdotally, I think some of the folks I know who run internet exchanges without SLAs, often talk about the fact that, oh, internet's best service, right? That the internet exchange itself is a part of the internet, right? Which I think is true. I think internet exchanges are basically, in my mind, kind of the knots where we tie networks together to create what is the internet in a lot of ways, right? I mean, transit providers do the same thing, but internet exchanges, I'm almost more so, are kind of the linkages that kind of create the internet out of all these disparate networks. And so essentially they're part of the internet. And because they're part of the internet service is always best effort by nature because you're going across multiple networks, right? If you buy internet service from Joe's Internet in your local neighborhood, Joe is not the one connecting you up to the Google servers when you do a search, right? Joe is handing your traffic off to someone else, who's handing it off to someone else, who's handing it off to Google. You don't know how many hops are going to be in between. You don't know what's going on. There's no way that Joe can provide a full SLA end to end on that service because it's completely out of Joe's control. And that's why internet services a lot of times are considered best effort. And I've heard people translate that over for the internet exchange and say, okay, well, the internet exchange doesn't have an SLA because it's part of the internet and internet's best effort. Do you have any response to that argument?
I mean, yeah, it's internet's like a team sport, right? And just like I said, I run everything redundant. I expect you to run everything redundant too. So your customers should have everything redundant. If you're single home to an IX, you're already doing something drastically wrong. So in that
Yeah.
sense, yeah, your network shouldn't really be affected if the IX goes down. But that doesn't mean that I'm not going to tell you that I'm running a proper service, and that doesn't mean that you shouldn't be telling your customers that as well by having multiple connections. Or if you are for some reason overly dependent on an IX, most IXs run redundant switches, buy two ports
Mhm.
across redundant switches, and there you have a redundancy. So absolutely best effort, but you absolutely have to do your part and run redundant as well, I think.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. If I can restate that with a slightly different perspective, I think what you're saying is while the internet exchange may be part of a redundant internet strategy for their customers and maybe part of the global internet in general, the internet exchange itself is a network into itself that can be built in a redundant, resilient way so that it can provide an SLA for the services it provides. Now, it obviously can't provide an SLA for everyone else, for all the peers that are connected, but it can provide an SLA for its own network, for its own switches, backbone, whatever you have there, right? Services, route servers, all that stuff can be built in a way within that domain of the internet exchange that it's SLA worthy, so to speak.
Yep, exactly. And that's why there's some networks that won't connect to an IX unless they can connect with diverse redundant ports. So
Sure.
it's how you run your network. You need to know how you run your network. If you're going to be dependent on that IX traffic, build two ports across two devices. If it's just like, it's just to save a few dollars on peering when I can and the traffic reroutes automatically to transit, then yeah, you can buy a single port. It's just a cost savings. It's
Yeah,
kind of,
yeah. Well, but even if you're one of those networks that says, okay, this internet exchange connection is kind of extra bonus, whatever. If it goes down, I don't really care. I've got enough transit to cover it. I've got redundant transit. The internet exchange is just whatever extra, right? Even then, even if I only want to buy one port, I feel like it would still be good for me to know that the internet exchange itself provides an SLA on its services. So I know that I'm buying a single thread to it, but I also know that it's probably going to work, unless the corner case of something on my specific port goes wrong, I can know that everything else is going to work. Whereas if I do one port into an IX without an SLA at all, now it's not just my port that I'm taking a risk on, it's the whole fabric potentially.
yep, exactly. And then even if the port's staying up, especially with most IXs are spread across data centers nowadays, if they oversubscribe their links or their mesh, like the last thing you want is your traffic getting usually local pref to route over the IX and they're running their links hot and you're getting huge latency or something across that. So you always want to know that the IX is run correctly. Otherwise, you probably don't want to connect to it.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And there are some like commercial IX operators who are providing SLAs. Like you said, you did it at the Chicago Internet Exchange, which is a single kind of neutral IX. So that's fairly rare in that circumstance, I think. But there are some bigger, data center operators that run their own IXs, and I think they often provide some kind of SLA. Not all of them, I don't think, but some do. There's also some kind of big commercial type, just pure IX operators mostly based out of Europe, that offer SLAs. And one, I mean, we can talk about DKIX a little bit. I think DKIX, which is out of Germany, they claim that because they provide an SLA, that's why they have more diverse peers than almost anybody else. They have these enterprise customers, right? So I think like BMW and Mercedes and a few other big German enterprises do peering, where you don't see that in many other countries and many other enterprises. And they claim it's because they provide this great SLA. Do you think that's true?
I hadn't heard that before, so I guess I have no idea. It sounds
Off
like
the cuff,
bullshit to
maybe.
me, but
So anyway, so I think we've established that SLAs in general are good, right? Making this promise to your customers that you're going to run your network in a way that they would expect, in a way that follows best practices, builds redundancy, has the right systems, people, processes, all that stuff. It is a good thing. Maybe that's a no-brainer. And then the second thing is, from that also applies to internet exchanges and the network that the internet exchanges run and the tools that they run, right? Their route servers, their looking glasses, their portals, all that stuff. No reason why they shouldn't be making that same promise to their customers. And we've also established that there are a lot of internet exchanges out there that are run on a volunteer basis, where the folks maybe either don't want to or literally don't have the time or capability to provide that 24/7 proactive network monitoring, maintenance, troubleshooting, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? They really just can't. They're volunteers, right? They're not a staff of professionals to run this thing. So what can they do? Is there a way for them, and this is where I'm teeing up FullCtl, obviously, what can they do to provide an SLA for their customers?
like you said, that's what the FullCtl IX Ops offers. It's a full 24/7 staffed NOC to offer tier one support for their customers, monitor everything, and run it as needed. With our automation.
Yeah, exactly right. I think, and that's exactly why we built the service that is, we call it IX operations, IX ops. It's essentially professional staffing with fractional pricing. We provide experienced, reliable, dedicated staff at a price that any internet exchange can afford, because you don't have to staff this yourself, right? If you're an independent internet exchange, hiring enough people to run a 24/7 NOC is cost prohibitive. It's not going to work. But being able to pay a fraction of that based on your size, I think makes a lot of sense. It gets past the issues of volunteerism, right? Because volunteers can be really great. They can also get busy at their day job and disappear for a while. And if that happens right during an outage, you can have problems, right? You can have an exchange down for days or even weeks, just because no one is available to take a look at it. So having something like FullCtl's IX Ops behind the scenes makes a lot of sense, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And there's actually quite a few things I wanted to go into on that. So hopefully I
Yeah.
remember them all by the time I'm done talking. But maybe backwards up the stack, the volunteerism is something that we've seen a lot. And I volunteered for tons of places, and volunteers can totally get burnt out. And especially, I think, get burnt out when you feel like you're just doing all this work. So one of the cool things that I noticed with taking over on some of the IX stuff from people with IX ops is volunteers went from not wanting to do anything and not doing anything to then we step in and start doing it, and then all of a sudden volunteers step back in, and because they can have fun in doing it, because it's not their responsibility. They know they don't have to go solve this ticket or do this problem because we're going to solve it. But maybe they're not doing anything on a Sunday afternoon, and oh, there's a ticket in the queue, I'll grab it. So I think it works really well for that, just kind of getting the volunteer and getting the community feeling back with that.
Yeah, it's
um,
been really cool seeing that, right? When FullCtl comes in and takes over kind of professional operations of the IX, it makes it fun again for the volunteers to jump in and help out. So they actually help out more than they did when they were the ones being relied upon sometimes. Yeah.
Exactly. And volunteers get to volunteer for the stuff they want to do, and maybe not.
Mhm.
Sometimes when you don't have that, like you're doing 10 things you hate to do one thing that you love, which isn't fun. So yeah, it works out really well, I think.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Um, the other thing I wanted to say is not only is it nice to get like our staff involved, but internet exchanges are kind of their own beast, and not a lot of knock techs really understand them. And I know recently I've been involved with, I want to make sure to not really call things out too much here, but in handing off an IX to a data center NOC to handle. and talking to the customers, and they're being extremely frustrated because it goes to a knock who doesn't even understand what an IX is. There's, a back and forth 3 or 4 times to the tech, then it gets escalated to a network engineer. And even sometimes their first level network engineers maybe don't understand exactly what an IX is or how to communicate, or the fact that, like, if you're doing maintenance on your IX, this isn't a typical transit customer. Generally, IX customers are a lot more savvy, want to know what's going on, want to be told what's going on, because they're happy to turn down their sessions or whatever while you're doing maintenance. But any of a number
Yeah,
of things anyway, that it's so specialized that it's nice from the IX ops to have everybody we have on staff knows exactly what an IX is, how it operates, how to communicate with people. Oftentimes are like on friendly bases with major networks, like network engineers, like that are connecting to us because we know them all because it's a small community, that sort of thing.
abs- absolutely. Yeah, that's another really, really good point. I'm just going to repeat it, paraphrase, because I think that's a good way
Right,
to
but
get
from Grizz.
the AI to pull it out. Well, just because the AI will pull it out better, I think if we both say it. You know, because a traditional Knox, there are managed service writers out there, right? So theoretically, an internet exchange could go sign up for a Knox service from an MSP, and there are that's an option, right? But what we've found is that their pricing is way too high, and they don't cover what IXs really need. Um, like you said, right? Internet exchanges, when you know how they operate, they're pretty simple, but nobody, it's really niche, right? Not that many people understand how an IX actually operates and what's actually important in an IX. It is different than other networks. And so having that specialized knowledge, and as you said, those relationships also to reach out to the right folks when stuff goes wrong is just huge. Another thing that I've seen some IXs try to do is, like, they'll hire like one person to be the guy, or the girl who runs the IX for them. But honestly, like, there's not that many rock stars out there. There's not that many people who can do everything for an IX and do it 24/7 and do it for months on end without, burning out or flaking out, or missing something or whatever. So, again, another reason why, like, having FullCtl do it on a fractional pricing, you actually get a whole team instead of one person. So you don't have to expect one person to be the rock star, to be the unicorn, to know everything, always be available, et cetera, et cetera. You've got a team, and because we're a team, also we do documentation and proactive maintenance and all the stuff that is often really, really hard, especially for volunteer organizations, but really for any network engineers anywhere. Some of that stuff is tough. um, and then I think the final thing, right, just kind of wrapping out our vision. I don't know if you had another point after those two, but one thing I think is interesting is these independent IXs. I think it's a really, really cool model to have a member run, local IX that's tied into the local community, that has leadership that's tied into the local community. But there's no reason why that leadership then can't rely on a service writer that is expert in managing IXs, so that basically everyone's using the same operations team, but everyone can manage their policies, their procedures, their interactions with customers and members, whatever, all differently and based on the local situation, but still be able to rely on a team that can provide that SLA, to their members, customers, clients, what have you.
Yep, for sure.
Um, cool. Anything else that you can think of about internet exchanges and SLAs?
So I think the only other thing that I don't know that we need to focus too much on is, since we do offer full automation, that's kind of another reason why we can offer a lot of service for what
Mm,
I consider to be a very fair price, because we can set up automation for almost everything and have self-service portals that we pass down to customers as well, so they don't have to call somebody up in the middle of the night to change their MAC address. They can just go log into FullCtl and change their MAC address if they have a line card go out or something like that. So
yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. That is an excellent point. I think you're right. That's probably one of the reasons why MSPs traditionally have been so expensive for what you get, is they're just throwing people at it, right? It's all people power. It's all a bunch of engineers, a bunch of individuals. Whereas we're actually leveraging software, we're leveraging automation and orchestration, to provide this, which, to your point, does two things. It makes it more efficient on our side, so we can have better pricing, and also it provides that self-service function that you talked about, right? Both for the IX operators, so those volunteers can get in there and do stuff if they want, also for the IX's customers to get in there and self-serve so that there's less requests coming through email and things, which helps everybody out, makes everything more efficient. Yeah, good, really good point. I'm glad you brought that up. Well, cool. That's it. So internet exchanges are the glue, the knots, the cross points of the fabric of the internet. They're super important, and because of that, there's no reason why they shouldn't be run with SLAs. And for organizations that are, IX organizations that are too small to build their own knock and do it all themselves, there is FullCtl and the IX operations service to provide professional IX staffing at that fractional pricing.